Hey everyone, it's Lydia Desnoyers, your favorite CPA here. Welcome to webisode number 3 of Put Lyd On It live stream series. I'm so excited that you guys are here joining. I'm gonna stall a little bit and wait for people to join this conversation that we're gonna have on building generational wealth through entrepreneurship. So I'm so excited as an entrepreneur myself and being very intentional about building generational wealth for my family and my descendants and stuff. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really, really excited about the speakers I have today. They're amazing speakers. I have Monique Hayes of Estate Made Easy. Monique is an attorney, and she's going to help us, identify ways to protect our assets and our wealth as we develop and create them. And you guys have to check her out. She's phenomenal as an attorney and as an entrepreneur, thinking about the common folks and giving us access to protect our assets through her website, Estates Made Easy. So make sure you check her out on Instagram. We have her handle right there. I also have Fabiola Florenville of Blueprint Creatives. Fabiola is like a serial entrepreneur, and I couldn't think of a better person to have on this episode to share her own journey and how she's building generational wealth and things that we need to think of as women entrepreneurs. So thank you both so much for joining me. You both look amazing and fabulous. And so I'm gonna dive right into it and just go into it. So Fabiola, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about your journey and what entrepreneurship means to you and how you're able to use entrepreneurship to build generational wealth. And also, what does generational wealth mean for you?
Well, I mean, I've always been an entrepreneur, so I think that definition is a little different for everyone because some people are entrepreneurs by necessity, whether you got laid off or whatever the case may be, and you just found yourself in a different role and it happened to work for you. I've always been an entrepreneur, so I've never really gone into the workplace. So it was natural for me to always be in business, and I knew that would be the case for me since as early as the 7th grade. So for me, it's always been about, me just having ownership of whatever I wanted to do and not really being guided by any set norms or any, direct paths. And even after I got my master's degree, I still decided to forego the corporate route to go into business. So it's always been, in my plan. And that looks different for everyone else, but it's all part of knowing where you want to be and what it's going to take for you to get there. So generational wealth for me is about having something valuable and worthy that you will feel proud about leaving behind for someone else. And whether it's dollars or whether it's assets or a business, it's about doing what you can now. So that way, 2, 3, 4 generations after you, your name still lives on.
I love that. And I'm gonna point out something that you said when you said a distinction of what entrepreneurship may look different for different people, right? By necessity, whether you got laid off or if you were more intentional, it was always your plan. And the reason I'm having this conversation is because regardless of which route you took or how you ended up there, if you want to build generational wealth and have that legacy, have your name live on afterwards, there are still things that we can do, whether you became an entrepreneur by necessity or by plan, that entrepreneurship can still be used, if you do it the right way and you want it to last, so you don't have to go back to a job where, or go back to that corporate world, whether you were laid off or whatever the case may be, but being able to use the your business and stuff to create the generational wealth. So thank you for making that distinction. I just want people to get out of it that even if you came across your business by chance, if you wanted to have longevity, certain things that you can be doing. So thank you so much for making that distinction. So Monique, what does generational wealth mean to you?
So for me, generational wealth is really about legacy and being able to preserve and sustain a legacy. for your family and the iterations of your family for generations to come.
Mhm.
And so it's not only about wealth, it is about values. It's about the things that allow for opportunity and options to be available to not only yourself, but the future of your family.
Mhm. I love that. So when you say not just a wealth, but more of value, can you elaborate on that a little bit more for us?
Sure, because sometimes when you use the term wealth and wealth planning or legacy planning, it can be out of reach for day-to-day people. And so because they don't view themselves as wealthy, their mindset separates them from the opportunity to be wealthy in the future or to establish wealth in the future. So I try to make the conversation accessible to a broader range.
Mhm.
So ultimately, it's not just about a ledger, dollars and
Mhm.
cents, what your net worth is, because there are some things that are immeasurable in terms of value. Some things that are part of your family legacy, the work ethic, the culture, the ingenuity, those things cannot be measured. So I would not be able to encapsulate that
Mhm.
with the term wealth, but it's to absolutely be a part of your wealth planning,
Got
with
it.
part of your legacy planning, a part of the things that you pass on to your family. So that's why I try to not just keep bracket people into
Mhm.
the conversation about estate planning or wealth
Mhm.
planning around dollars and cents. It's the things that drive you towards
Mhm.
making dollars and cents, but then also preserving that for future
Right.
generations.
Right. And so when we talk about generational wealth and why it seems to be, well, I'll ask you this. Would you guys agree, or what are your thoughts on these conversations and generational wealth being accessible to all people, all walks of life, and or you use the term brackets, and as a CPA, so I think of tax brackets. So reaching out to all those. What are your thoughts on that gap of where people are not really educated on it, or perhaps thinking that this doesn't apply to me? I don't have enough. I don't make enough. What are your thoughts on that? And what do you think the gaps are? I'll ask you, Fabiola.
I mean, I think the biggest gap is people not understanding what they have, what their assets are, and assets are not always tangible. And people think that if I don't own real estate
Mhm.
and I don't have a business, I don't have anything to leave behind. But a lot of people have 401ks, they have life insurance policies. A lot of wealth is created just from life insurance by itself.
Mhm.
So it's how people classify and how they think about money and wealth and everything else that they can potentially leave behind. I mean, at the end of the day, ultimately, it's everything that you're working for right now. Why are you working for it?
Right.
Are you working for it so that, at the end of your lifetime, it can burn out and there's nothing to show for it? Or are you working for it so that even long after you're gone, you still have something to show for it, in that, generations after you don't have to go through the same hurdles or the same challenges or the same pathways. They can get a leg up. And that's the difference between certain communities. Some communities, they have that legacy plan where, you can take the baton and then just
Mhm.
start from where the last generation started off.
Right.
And then there are other communities where, there's nothing that was previously left. So every generation keeps having to start over. And I think if people kind of reframe how they thought about that, you're spending 40, 50, 60 hours a week working. Why?
Right. Right.
And if you know what that why is, and even it doesn't have to be because you have kids or because I'm a grandparent, but what's the bigger why? What's your motivation for everything that you're doing? Otherwise, it dies with you when you die. And that would have just been a life just spent expending energy that you have nothing to show for it.
Thank you so much for that. That's absolutely true, and you hit the nail on the head. It's in terms of thinking that it has to be a certain asset, it has to be real estate or whatever, but it can be the other intangibles, and it doesn't have to be you know, you have to start from somewhere. So you don't necessarily have to have millions and millions right now, but there's still stuff that you can pass on to give the next generation a leg up. So Monique, from your perspective, working with different folks, whether it's, well, you know, this conversation is about the generational wealth through entrepreneurship. So what are some of the things that you've seen in terms of, you know, the challenge that people have, or the gaps that they have, or the lack of education that they have?
So one of the challenges is that when you think about estate planning or wealth planning, no one really wants to think about or deal with the inevitability of their demise. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to even get your mind set around just what needs to be done, right. And that causes a delay. So a lot of people don't do the planning on the front end, on the estate planning side. So that's generally. As it relates to business people, so I'll just give a little bit of my background. I'm a practicing attorney. I'm a business lawyer. Most of my practice is corporate restructuring. So I work with business people all the time in the context of either financial distress or corporate restructuring, so that they can take advantage of changes in the market. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the people that I'm working with are entrepreneurs or business people. And in business, what you have to have a vision for your business, and a plan for the operation of your business. But in order to have sustainability, that business plan has to have a procedure and process for sustainability outside of the individual. Right. So meaning, if you were not here today because you were going on maternity leave, because you were on vacation, because you were incapacitated, because you passed away, in any of those scenarios, what would happen with your business? How would it continue to operate? Who will have operational control? Who would have beneficial control? Those are incredibly important conversations that business people need to have at the front end. As individuals, we need to make those plans within our own legacy planning. When you think about your life and legacy planning, that's for your estate plan. When you talk about your will, but those things have to be mirrored in the business plan. If the person that is doing the plans is also an entrepreneur, particularly if they have partners within their business, or if they have business partnerships and responsibilities to both parties. So it may be one thing for you to go into business with a partner, and you have, maybe you have an operating agreement and you just start a startup business, or maybe you purchase a legacy business from someone else. God forbid something happens to you or something happens to your partner, and if your operational documents for the business do not mirror the estate planning documents of the individual owners, then you have a question about, okay, now am I in business with the wife of my former partner? That's a totally different and unexpected consequence as a result of the loss of one of the entrepreneurs. And many people don't think about that because you're particularly in the startup phase, or even in the early business phases, you're so embroiled in the work of the business. Right. You don't necessarily think about what would happen if I was gone or my partner is gone. So there are ways to do on the planning side to make sure that you have a plan and a process to determine whether there's going to be beneficial ownership or operational control that's transferred to your family or your partner's family in the event of either of your demise, and what that would mean for the business. Those are very important conversations that entrepreneurs need to have with their partners. The same thing if you have not partners within the company, but you may have third parties that you do business with, and particularly if you have a solo practice or a small business, then the persons that you have contracts to do business with, they may envision themselves or their commitment with you personally.
Right. So it sounds like, I mean, there's like a plethora of reasons why you need, as an entrepreneur and a business owner, all these conversations you'd be having that we kind of take for granted, right? And so, Fabio, I want to ask you this question because it's something I work with my clients of how changing their mindset and how they treat their businesses as assets, right? And so when they think of their business as an asset and think of all the risks associated with the asset, so everything that Monique just mentioned and all the risk and partnership and all that stuff. So from your perspective, being the serial entrepreneur that you are, what sort of conversations and how often, I guess, do you have these conversations and planning for your entities and your planning?
Well, I have an estate plan. So my business is written into my estate plan. Mm-hmm. But I think the biggest challenge is how people view their business, right? Mm-hmm. Remember earlier I said a lot of businesses get started off just because, you think that you want to go into
They just need to pay their bills. Yeah, they just need to pay their bills.
Right. So you're not thinking about long term. And so people generally don't have like exits in mind, right? Mm-hmm. They don't have successions in mind. They don't even plan for 5 years from now, let alone a year from now. So it's like, if you're not, so it's, and then a lot of times it's so easy. I mean, I blame myself for this too. It's so easy to work in your business and not on the business. So you never really get a chance to really take yourself out of it and really think about those planning needs. So it's really about, how do you see yourself in business? Is this just a paycheck? Is it a job for you? Or is it something that you're trying to create to be employable to others? And then to even live on behind you. I mean, essentially, by nature of businesses are meant to be a product that you can easily sell to someone else, that you can pass on to someone else if you decided, I want to retire, or if I die, or whatever the case may be. But I don't think we often think about a business as a product, and so we don't treat it as a product. We just treat it like I'm going into the job every day. So you end up becoming more of an entrepreneur than a business person or a business owner. So I think that shift starts with, your why and what you're doing, and then how you see yourself in the future in that business. Like, I certainly don't see myself in any one business to eternity. I always think about the exit in mind, whatever that may look like. But, it's definitely about what your end goals. And I think if people start to reverse engineer the end from the beginning, then they'll be able to probably plan more practically. Yeah. And then better.
I love that, to reverse engineer, to think about the end first, the end game, the goal, what you ultimately wish to do with the entity. Let me ask you a very simple question. Is there a certain dollar amount you need to have or own, or make rather, before you do estate planning?
Is that question to me?
I'll start with you.
That's eternal.
No, there isn't a certain dollar amount. It is really about what's the most efficient way to get to the protections that you need. And so there may be some types of estate planning products that are more appropriate based on the dollar amount, like, or based on the family circumstance. Like, generally speaking, I say that if you have, a minor child or a real estate, then you absolutely need a trust. Irrespective of how much you have in your net worth.
Right.
Just because whatever you have, you want to manage it efficiently
and preserve it.
And you want to design how the minor child's benefits will be dispersed over time, and you want to avoid probate. Those like baseline things that you want to have. Beyond that, there may be some people that don't have minor children or real estate, so a trust may not be necessary. Then, depending on what state you may be in, there may be more efficient types of estate planning tools that may work for you, even if you don't have a trust, but you only have real estate. Say, for instance, if you're in Florida, this is going to be your forever home. You may not necessarily need a trust. If you know who you're going to transfer a property to, it may be efficient for you to just have a ladybird deed, and you can work with a real estate lawyer to get that done. And you would have, beneficiary designations on your accounts. Those types of planning may be necessary. None of these things are based on dollar amounts. They're based on what your plan is, your design for the accessibility of the dollar amount, and then how to get it as efficiently and effectively done. So that's a long answer to your short question. The short question is, it shouldn't be based on, the short answer is that your decision to do some type of estate plan shouldn't be based on how much money you have or how much money you make. It should be based on what plan you have to preserve and protect not only whatever amount of money it is, but whatever family member that you have. So that could be an elderly parent, that could be a minor child, that could be a spouse. But those should be the drivers, not so much the money.
Right. And thank you so much for clarifying that, because I imagine a lot of the apprehension or why people perhaps are not thinking about it. One, as you mentioned, nobody wants to really talk about their mortality, right? Or what things would look like if they're gone. But the other thing may be because, we know that, some people may hear the term about estate taxes, right? So, and we know that, for you to be subject to estate taxes, you have to have certain amount of millions of dollars of assets, or net worth rather, before you are subject to estate taxes. So I think people may get those two confused, that, oh, well, if I don't make millions, right, they just kind of conflate the two. So if I don't have this much in assets, if I don't have millions and millions of dollars in assets, then I don't need to do planning, or there's nothing for me to pass on, there's nothing for me to do. And that's why I wanted to clarify or ask that question and get clarification from you guys in terms of, do you need a certain dollar amount? Do you need to be making millions or have net worth of millions of dollars right now to start with the planning? So my question for you, back to Fabiola, with your entrepreneurship. The second apprehension is the third rather, issue that people may not be doing planning, or I think I used too many words there. That people may not be planning rather, is they don't know who to talk to. So Fabiola, talk to us a little bit about who are part of your advisors, who are people you talk to, how can people get started with the planning?
Well, a couple of things. You always have to be around other business owners and entrepreneurs, right? Because we learn from each other. We learn from forums like this, reading stuff online. But I also believe that you have to always have an attorney and a CPA very close nearby, and business advisors. Like you can't be that sustainable in business without having a go-to for each of those brackets. And a lot of people believe in do-it-yourself legal work. I'm just not of that. People want to, go to Google University and draft up their own contracts, do their own taxes, and go on Intuit or whatever they use to do their own taxes. And that ends up costing you a lot of money on the back end. So it's really about putting a lot of the measures in place, so that way you have a system. And so I don't really make any decisions without me going to my business advisors. They advise me on the structure, on strategy, on, future things that I want to do. And having that person that understands your industry sector and that has that type of experience is important, because then you can start to be more proactive with the moves that you make, because you have someone that's always guiding you along the way. So I don't plan for the now. I'm always learning and thinking about what does next year look like for me, and how do I stretch myself from that place.
I love it. So I have a question from our guest right now. Juana is asking, are there any particular kinds of businesses that are better for legacy building over others? I'll ask you, Fabiola, since I already have you on the screen.
I don't know if Juana means business industry or business types. But
let's do both. Let's say business industries.
I think any business, if you have a business where you have a market for it, right, and there is a demand and a need for it, that essentially can be legacy. Because legacy does not have to be tied down to any particular business. Like Monique said in the beginning, it's not one particular thing where you can use to create legacy. You may take the profits that you make from one business to start a nonprofit that can be a legacy, right? Because now you're doing social good that you can leave for your kids, or something that can live on. So Monique made it very clear, like it's about the values, the systems, or the work that you want to do, the impact that you want to create. So it's not necessarily about this business has to live on for my kids to pass on. But, a lot of times we see that happening, right? This company has been in business for 150 years and they continue to pass it on. So but I think the market is always changing. And the thing is that those businesses that say that they've been on for 100 years, they've adapted. They buy other businesses, they used to sell A, now they sell A and B, and then they sold it again, and now they sell D. So they continue to adapt. So I don't think we have to limit ourselves to, my business is not really a long-term or a legacy building business. Do the business, do it right, and then that can probably take you into something else that can create the legacy for you.
I absolutely love that because, like you said, as far as reverse engineering, right? So when we know what the end goal is, then how do we get there? So, there are things that we have to invest in and consider in our business. Otherwise, we have like the blockbusters that fail, right? They don't adapt. So that's part of building generational wealth for your business is listening to the market and investing in infrastructure or whatever it is in your organization to, again, provide with sustainability and longevity. So let's talk about that a little bit. You talk about the changes in the market and stuff. What are some other tips and stuff that you would give an entrepreneur in terms of building their business and creating sustainability?
I think we have to stretch ourselves, right? Never get comfortable, because this business is not your end all be all. It's just a pathway, and that can lead you into something else. So as long as you stay like open and creative or even curious, that can lend yourself into other stuff. So, I mean, the business can essentially be your seat, but it's really about just being open and keeping your eyes open. A lot of times we stay in our comfort zone. So I've been doing this all my life, so I'm just going to stay doing this, and I don't really venture out of it. But if you stay out of that comfort zone, never get comfortable, in business, they always say you eat what you kill. So if you're always looking to grow, then it'll allow you to keep reinventing yourself. I mean, the thing is that businesses get stale. Even for my own particular business, something as simple as redesigning my website. I go through a whole redesign, probably every year and a half, 2 years, right? I go through a whole brand refresh. I go through a whole repositioning strategy, reevaluate my audiences and my targets and how I want to position. Right now I'm creating a new service line. So businesses get stale. You get bored being in business. It's so easy to get bored and lose the momentum and lose the passion, that you don't have the same juice and the same, excitement that you had before. So you always have to continue to innovate your business and innovate yourself as well.
I love it. So it sounds like reinvesting in yourself and in your business and stuff. What are some other ways that people can invest in their business to grow and stuff like that? In terms of, you said, for you, for example, you redo your website. What are some other things? And let me kind of give a little context of what I'm asking. When we were talking about succession planning and thinking of when we die, right? How it passes on. But again, back to the things that we need to be doing right now, because succession plan can look different ways, right? So we can add our members into the operations, or excuse me, our family, relatives, or whatever, into our operations, so that way they can take over. Or, there's things we can do. You have companies that go public, but then they have majority share. So what are some other ways that people can invest right now in their businesses, big or small, to provide longevity? And Monique, I'll direct that question towards you.
Sure. Part of it relates to some of the points that Fabiola was making in terms of investing into yourself and make sure that you're always evolving with the business. The other part of my response is doing the assessment first, so you can know where you need to make those investments, where you need to make pivots. As it relates to succession planning, early on, the business owner, even if it's a startup business, should have an idea about the succession of the business, whether it is hopefully to be passed on, or if there is an exit strategy that they're planning for. But the succession plan should be a thought. And so part of that is, what type of assessment do I have to make? Within the operations of the business, you need to understand if you have the right people internally or externally as advisors that have the capacity and the capability to move forward with the business at the point of your exit, because you sold, or because you are incapacitated, because you decided to do something else. And at whatever point that you're ready or are required to move on, where would that lead the business? Do they have someone of capable skill and desire to run the business? A lot of times, particularly in small family-owned businesses, there's an assumption that the next generation within the family will want to run the business. But
what do they don't?
That's not their passion. That's not their vision. You don't want to be caught off guard as a business owner or brokenhearted as a parent to hear that your child
doesn't want to be an attorney, doesn't want to be a CPA.
Right, exactly. But you want to have a plan for it, and that may be the case. And you can do within your succession planning alternatives to make sure that even if they are not the operational owner, in operational control, maybe they are the beneficial owner. Then maybe they own the land and you sold the business, and so they're still driving revenues from that business that you started so long ago. Or your family member or child or whatever part of your legacy that you're leaving is still benefiting from it, even if they're not actually running the business and toiling the way that you do. So you have to be flexible in your planning, because you don't know what the future is going to bring, but you want to plan in such a way that regardless, you have the ability to sustain the legacy. And so the first step to doing that is doing the assessment and making sure that you have the right people with the right capacity and the willingness to do it. And then if you find out that you don't, which is absolutely normal, don't panic, don't be brokenhearted. That's when you adjust the plan. That's when you pivot to make the changes. In practical sense, sometimes like if you have a partner, I've had businesses to come to me as an attorney. One partner just doesn't want to go for the long run. They may have been there for the start, but they don't want to be in for the next 50 years. But in order to take it to the next level, you have to buy that partner out. Where are you gonna get that money from?
So it seems like having partners, it almost seems like that conversation needs to be had. It's more pressing, I guess, to have it, but it's definitely still important to have as a solo entrepreneur, or whatever the case may be. Okay, so here's a question. So as you know, Put Lyd On It is all about women entrepreneurs and stuff like that. So, I think we've come a long way. I mean, we came from getting our right to vote, getting our right to open bank accounts, to own land and own property. And now here we are talking about estate planning. So it may still very be new for women. What are some unique challenges that you feel as women yourselves, or working with women entrepreneurs? And Fabiola, I'll start with you, being a woman entrepreneur. Do you face any unique challenges, or whether they're subtle or not? And I know Fabiola personally. Fabiola, listen, there's no such thing as a challenge for Fabiola. She just does what she has to do. But are there any challenges and stuff that you can talk of that you've witnessed or experienced yourself, being a woman entrepreneur and building generational wealth?
I think sometimes the challenge could be self-imposed, not on purpose, but oftentimes we may think that we don't have others like ourselves to tap into or lean in on, or so sometimes is that women take on a lot, right? So we try to juggle everything and still be the boss. So that's also hard as and then we tend to feel guilty too, right? Especially if you're a mom, you're a wife. So it's easy to feel guilty. And I know for sure men are not feeling guilty about their success and the sacrifices that they have to make for that. So a lot of it is probably a bit self-imposed. And then you could be in an industry. You may be or see an opportunity that may be a male dominated industry, right? And think about the challenges, and that could present some barriers and some roadblocks that might already happen in the beginning before you even get to that. So I think the biggest thing is to just believe in your confidence and knowing that it's all available to you, and that there's no limit. And because of that, I think sometimes we may limit how far we see we can go, right? Because it's almost like you're punished for wanting to make a certain sacrifice. Or if you're a mom, you can't be a mom and juggle a business and take care of your husband and do this and then think about another business idea that you want to launch and still feel good and healthy about your role as a mom and a wife. So it's really just about trying to figure out what works in this season of your life. And then going back to the question that you asked before, I think our biggest challenge is strategy, right? And the reason why men move the way they move is because they feel like they own it, right? They have
they're entitled to it. Yeah.
Right. So they feel like they own it, and you can't deny them of it. So we think like that, then we tend to make certain moves like that as well. And this is probably something that you can speak on. Like, we can be so one-dimensional that we just stick in this one box, versus we think about how do we vertically grow? Like, do we buy another business? Do we add on extensions to our existing business? How do you move with that type of intent? And it may seem aggressive. It's hard for women to be aggressive in business and still be seen as feminine. So it's almost like you got to pick your poison. Are you going to be the soft, dainty, feminine woman? Or are you going to make certain moves that may make you look aggressive or masculine or even or anything like that? So I think there are some things that kind of keep us or mentally create barriers for us as well.
So Michaela, thank you for that question, because I think we're just talking about this. So I have a question for Michaela. Say you do face challenges as a woman in business and building generational wealth. How do you handle this and overcome these challenges? And I feel you kind of touched on that. So let me ask this question, Monique, the same question I just asked Fabiola, in terms of like, what are the challenges? And maybe you can dive into how do we overcome them, right? And then I also want to ask it, or reframe the question, and what are some things that we have to our advantage as women entrepreneurs? Because I'm guilty of this too. I tend to ask the negative or the challenges, but what are some of the opportunities that we have as women entrepreneurs? So answer in whatever order you want to answer. I think I just asked you like 3 questions.
Sure, no problem. So beginning with the challenges, from my vantage point as an attorney and also having a estate planning business, what I see from women entrepreneurs is concern about the choices that they're making for their business right now as a potential impediment or delay on their future plans to have a family. And so a lot of times business women historically have made sacrifices of their personal lives in order to direct full attention on their professional or business lives in the way that men historically, but not always, have had to do. Meaning there was always a nurturing and care support system a wife that a man had so that he could, without reluctance, take career advancements or begin an entrepreneurial journey without really thinking about the consequences
Right.
that would have on their family or their future family.
Mhm.
And so I think historically women have delayed their ambitions because of their professional and entrepreneurial ambitions, because of their desire for a family. I think when you talk about opportunities or positives right now, one of the things that I'm incredibly excited by is the fact that there are so many more women that are recognizing that it's not a either or, that it's both and. They can have the career or the business that they want. They can also prepare and preserve their legacy if they want to. If they want to have children now or in the future, there are opportunities for fertility advancements, for really designing the life that you would like to have. And I don't remember who exactly coined the term that you can have everything, you just can't have it at the same time. But I think it remains applicable to professional and entrepreneurial women, that you can have the life that you want, you can have the business that you want, you can have the family that you want. But you have to be strategic about it. To Fabiola's point, that may mean you may need to think about, whether or not you want to freeze your eggs. It may need to think about, whether or not you want to have a prenup agreement if you go into a marriage, what that is going to mean for your business, how you're going to protect your business, how you're going to protect your marriage. Both of those things are absolutely a part of the discussion. And right now it's completely available to professional and entrepreneurial women in a way that it wasn't even 10, 20 years ago.
Right.
So this is a great time for women to overcome challenges, and there are mechanisms to do so. And then more than that, there are people who have done it that you can look to as examples.
Right.
Lydia,
Go ahead, Fabiola.
Now I was going to say about the question that you mentioned to the advantage. As women, we should also be proud of the power that we have, right? And take more ownership of that, because a lot of times the environment makes us feel like, we shouldn't walk in that authority, right? Womanhood is a certain level of authority that we own, and that's something to use to your advantage. I also have a real estate business, and that's all white men, right? No, very little women. And if there are women, they're white, and never Black women. But there's an advantage to that as well. But that can, at the surface, be intimidating, because you might say that you won't be well received because you're going into a room with all white guys. You're the only woman. They're not going to take you seriously. They'll be sexist. But I found myself taking advantage of that, because a woman walking into a room with all men, don't you think you're going to catch some attention, first of all? And if what comes out your mouth makes sense and you know what you're talking about, you get taken seriously, because at the end of the day, it's still about money, right? You may not fit into the boys club, but men have no problem. A lot of men have no problem, bringing women on. Whatever Beyonce says, bring me to the room to close the deal, however she says, right? So men understand that women have a certain flair in how we do business. We're more patient, more compassionate, more understanding. We have a way with words, that they may not be able to, to land, to articulate in a way that's successful for them. And it obviously diversity. We always talk about diversity, right? But really, the differences in the genders brings a diverse way of doing things, right? And that always lends itself. And if women were to own that, like, you could really see how your femininity works in your favor as well.
Absolutely. I love it. So actually I love how it all kind of ties together, because in my last webisode, Am I on Mute, was about the challenges that women face in the business world and not feeling seen or heard. And one of my speakers, we talked about that. and it circles back to what you were saying, Fabiola, in terms of the negative thoughts and the self-limiting stuff are oftentimes self-imposed. And so if we decide these things that we perceive to be challenges, as you said, I'm the only Black woman walking into the room, that's going to be a challenge. But if we say, well, you know what, I'm the only Black woman in the room, I'm going to make it count, right? And I'm going to use it to my advantage, then that could be an opportunity for you. And then the second thing you said about when you open your mouth is what you're saying makes sense. So just being prepared. If you know your stuff and you come prepared, then being a woman is not limiting, right? It's empowering, and we can use that to our advantage. So with that said, we're ready to wrap up. I wanted to ask if anyone in the audience has any other questions, please put them in the comments, or even comments that you want to make, comments or questions, put them in the comment section. We are reading those. But before we go, any last words from my beautiful Miss Fabiola, my beautiful Monique, any last words or advice that you'd like to give to our women entrepreneurs who are listening and perhaps not listening right now? They're right now on the grind, but they're going to see this recording later. What would be some words of advice or encouragement that you would give to a woman entrepreneur right now in terms of building generational wealth? Fabiola.
I would say, well, two things. How do we work together, right? How do we collaborate? How do we pull our resources together so that we can scale? Because right now it's all about scalability. So your business may be small, maybe a one-person shop, maybe a 4 or 5 person shop, and then there's a complementary business with another woman that's in a similar space. There's nothing wrong with teaming, whether it's project specific or client specific or just in general. Babies exist for a reason. Partnerships exist for a reason. So I think that's one way for us to really think about how do we really move in confidence and strategy in business. And then secondly, just thinking about historically, right? When we think about the role of women in the house, women never handled the money, right? Men kept it away, right? That was a form of control. Sorry.
Yeah. Here's your allowance. Yeah.
Right. So this is probably we're maybe 2 generations removed from that. And maybe like the first real generation of women who, and I know people have a problem with the word independent, but where we actually have our own stuff and we have a bit more confidence. But if you think about the history of that, because women could never own, they couldn't vote, they couldn't, buy stuff. They didn't have their own money. They had to rely on the men in the house to provide for them. If you think about what that does in terms of fear with money, right? Our limitations in how we understand money, how we move towards money, because we may seem like that's a man's thing. Real estate is a man's industry, stocks and bonds and all of that, that's a man's thing. So it creates that level of, that's not due to me, right? That's not my lane. So if we rethink our relationship with money and rethink, because now it's no longer someone's giving you their hard-earned money as kind of like to pacify you for being a woman, but now you're working for your own money and you deserve to see your money go far. So if we rethink our relationship with money and how we view money, and how, as much as a man has worked for his money, we work for our money as well, and we deserve to see it go far, then we can start to think about strategy. We often carry the burdens of the household and of the family. So you want your kids to eat well in the future, and their kids' kids. When I did my estate plan, I created a 200-year plan, so that 200 years beyond me, there's it's spoken for in my estate plan. So rethink how we see money and not be intimidated. Even if you don't know it, don't be intimidated to go into new territory, to learn about it. Just because it's a good old boys club does not mean that women are not allowed. It's 2021 at this point.
I love it. And so circling back to us being supportive of each other, when we think about the challenges, I remember watching a movie and it was like all the men were go play golf with each other or go smoke cigars and let the women out. But maybe we need to do our own thing and support each other and have our own golf night or whatever you call it. So Monique, what are some words of encouragement or advice that you would leave our audience with?
Sure. I think that women do support each other in business. At least that's been my experience, and I'm so incredibly grateful for that. And it has grounded my perspective, and that probably starts from my mom and my sister. I don't think that my mom ever worked, but she absolutely handled the finances in our household, and then my sister was the same way, always entrepreneurial and just very conscious about the way that she cared for our family members. And so that I learned from her. And then I've had the benefit of the women in my circle, professional circle, as well as personal circles, that are all very attuned to their own journeys, and also attaching and propelling other women's journeys. So it's just so natural for me that I almost get shocked when I hear that there are women who don't have.
Right. Well, but for the longest, if we can be real, for the longest, it has been like that, right? Because there were only few seats in the room for women. And so we were trained or molded, manipulated to think that we have to compete with each other. So I think in the more recent years, we've seen that pivot where it's like, no, it's all about supporting one another. When one person gets that seat, make room for the next person. And so we're learning that. And I pray that is one of the generational, one of the things that we pass down from generation to generation. I hope, when I have my daughter, that's what I'm going to teach her. Like, that's all she's going to know is support one another. You're not competing with anybody and all that stuff. So you're absolutely right.
In terms of last words,
yeah, in terms of like feeling support, I'm like, you're the same way. When I hear of like women talking about other women, I'm like, what? Do they still do that? But but they do, right? And so we have to be conscious of it. And I think if whoever's listening, that we can support one another and stuff. So I'm sorry, I feel like I may have cut you off. Did you want to continue?
Oh no! In terms of the last words, you were going to. What I would share is that now is the time, of course, for women to design the life and the legacy that they want to have, to be at the forefront of that design. And I think that with women at the forefront of that design, you don't only have a business perspective, but you also have a family perspective.
Right.
And so what you're designing for is sustainability of the family, so that you have love and you also have money. You can have both. And no infighting within the family, because you have a design that allows everyone to be able to benefit to their own capabilities. And that's something that women are, I think, uniquely positioned to be in tune to. And so I think what I would say is step into the role that was designed for you. And then you move forward with designing the life and the legacy. And when I say the role that was designed for you, to me, that's the leadership role. I think women were always meant to be the leadership of the family in terms of the sustainability. I think that women were always meant to be that way. And now it's a perfect time for us to step into it.
I love that. I totally agree. We're just so naturally, such natural leaders. Ladies, thank you so much. This is such a great conversation. And I feel like there's a part 2 in the works later on. But thank you so much. I mean, this is all about here. This is how we support one another and provide each other with the tools and resources and the education that we need to move forward. So thank you so much for being part of Put Lyd On It webinar series. Ladies, thank you again to my viewers and audience. Thank you so much. You can reach out to our speakers if you want to show them some love or learn more about them. Their handles are right here. We have Monique at Estates Made Easy, Fabiola at Blueprint Creative Group, myself, Des CPA Advisory. User resources. We're here to support one another. So thank you so much. You ladies have a wonderful day. Get back to your grind, making that money and creating that generational wealth.
Thank you. Bye, Monique.
Bye.